Hello, and welcome to my new studio workshop series. Many of you have asked me how I work in the studio, how I have everything connected, and how I make everything work. So this is exactly what I'm going to present you in this video. So in one sentence, my workflow is that I mix before I record. This may sound really strange, especially considering that I'm using only hardware synthesizers. But I managed to do this by having everything mixed using a digital mixer together with MIDI sequencing. So I arrange and build up my song in my DAW in Cubase, only using MIDI data. And this MIDI data is also converted to CV gate for my older synths. Of course, the synths that are so old that don't have any MIDI or CV gate, those I have to record. But in 95% of the case, I do mix before I record. So there is not much going in to Cubase as audio before the song is ready. Let me show you an example of this, how this works. So I prepared a really short example for you, a really simple example, having an Alpha Uno 1 and a Monopoly playing a simple sequence like this. Now, because this is only MIDI, I can control and manipulate it and play with it without recording anything, so to say. Let's see how that works out. So you see the idea. The good thing with this is that I can play with the sounds, almost finished sounds. You know, compare it with a guitar player. A guitar player would never put his guitar, line in and start playing and then add effects afterwards, which is most of the thing that's happening when you work with synthesizers. That many times you're playing with a different sound than what it ends up becoming. So I really like this way of working because then I can actually play with the sounds, with the final sounds or close to final sounds, so to say, and how everything sounds. That I respond so much to how the synths sound to me and how the sound, how the instrument sounds like. So this is really important for me that I'm able to do this way. It's really fun. But it's of course quite complicated to build this up. So I'm going to show you how everything is routed and how I make it work. I have a Behringer X32 rack, which is my main mixer. It has 32 mixing channels, so it's quite limited in that sense, but it can take in a lot of inputs. I have this rack in the studio connected to my computer and sound card. My sound card is also running my monitors. The X32 rack has 22 inputs in itself. But then I have additional preamps. I have an S32 preamp, I have an S16 preamp, and these bring 48 channels additional to the X32. Then I have a second set of preamps, one additional S32 and one SD16. That brings me an additional 48 inputs. And I'm still using my 01 V96. I use it mainly for effects and also for additional preamps. And then I have one more preamp, D8. And I also have some audio going out from the X32 rack into the 01 V96 because I'm using it using its effect processors. So a total of 144 analog inputs are in use. For mixing, I'm using the Behringer's own X-Edit app, I think it's called, for the PC. And yeah, I'm really happy with how this works. I've been using it now since I started recording Urban Dreams, so I'm really familiar with it. But lately I started using tablets running Mixing Station because that app works really well also with the X32 mixer. And the great thing about those is that I get like a second set of screens purely for mixing. So while I'm working with the arrangement, with the MIDI arrangement in Cubase, I can still see what's happening on the mixer, so to say, using the tablets and using Mixing Station. And it's also really handy because you can link these two tablets together. So for instance, if I want to adjust the sound of, let's say, of the alpha unit, let's solo that one. So I can just select the channel I want, now the alpha unit channel, and then I have an overview in my right tablet. For instance, if I want to turn on a gate, I can do that, and I have like visual control, or kind of I see visually how everything works. Especially the equalizer is nice because you can directly go and turn off, for instance, the low cut filter, and yeah, do changes to the EQ really easily. And like you see at the same time how what everything does and how it works. And for instance, the compressor, turn it on or off, or adjust threshold, whatever you need adjusted. And you can see how it works at the same time, which is really nice. So yeah, like that. So that's roughly about the audio side. Now let's look into the MIDI side of things. So the center for MIDI is my computer and my DAW. I'm using Cubase for that. And my computer is connected to an internal network that I have in the studio, solely for MIDI and for controlling my digital mixers. Of course, my X32 rack can be controlled. I also have a third mixer. I have a Roland M200i that I'm using only for gated reverb for snare. So let me take a break and show you what that sounds like. So this is the snare without any reverb. And here's the snare with some gated reverb on from the M200i. So it's really like an 80s type of snare. But yeah, so I mainly use it for that, but it's just like a weird reverb that blends so nicely in with the rest, especially for the more 80s rock kind of songs that I do. I love using this reverb. Okay, but back to the MIDI routing. So these are controlled by LAN, by the local area network. Then also my tablets are going to the same router by Wi-Fi. So these are now connected by Wi-Fi to that internal MIDI network. Then, of course, all my synths are connected by MIDI. And I have a lot of MIDI inputs and outputs. I have a lot of 8 in, 8 out MIDI outputs, and those are connected by USB to my computer. So I have 2 Steinberg MIDX 8, the old ones, but they still work, and also an old MIDI Sport 8x8. And then I have newer ones, iconnectivities. I have Mayo 10, Mayo XL, and Mayo XM of these. In addition to MIDI inputs and outputs, they also provide additional USB MIDI inputs and outputs, which is really nice in this case where I have so many. So it's nice to have some of these USB MIDI gadgets going through the external routers instead of straight into the computer. In total, I have 50 about MIDI in and outs plus USB MIDI. So there is a lot of MIDI devices. So in addition to having the mixer being controlled through Wi-Fi and through network, I also control the mixer by MIDI. And this is really important for me because all the automation I do in MIDI in Cubase. Now some of my synths are so old that I can't use MIDI with them, but most of them can be controlled with CV gate. So I have a lot of Kenton boxes. I have 3 Kenton Pro 2000 Mark IIs and 1 Pro Solo Mark III, and I think I also have 1 Pro Solo Mark I or something like that. With the help of this, I have a total of 7 or 8 CV gate pairs that I can use for controlling or for playing my older synths. And then I also have over 20 CV auxes. That means like separate CV signals that I can program. In the example that I showed you, for instance, I can play it. The Monopoly here. That's being now controlled with CV gate. So first of all, I have a CV gate for the note data. And then I have an auxiliary CV, a separate CV, which is connected through MIDI to Aftertouch here. And the Aftertouch, which I now have on a separate wheel just for the convenience sake of it, the Aftertouch data then is translated into CV data that controls the filter on the Monopoly. I really enjoy to be able to hear the sound, to hear the almost final sound, how it's going to sound like in the end. And it's so inspiring to work this way because I can play with the sound. Let's listen to the JX8P sound. If I remove all the reverbs and delays, it sounds like this. Still quite nice, but I probably would end up playing a bit faster than when I have the reverbs on. And I noticed that I end up like kind of listening to the effects as well and playing a bit with the effects, especially if it's a free tempo tune. Then I really like respond to what the effects sound like. Yeah, so that's how the MIDI works. Before the end, let me show you how a typical template looks for me in Cubase. So my templates are rather simple. I just have all the synths basically listed and the correct MIDI channel set and the correct port. And then I have a few test notes in the beginning to see that can I get any sound at all. Okay, it seems to be working. And then I also have, depending on the synth, I'm resetting certain controllers just so I can be sure that, okay, now I reset all the controllers and now I'm good to go, basically. As you can see, some of these synths have like folders, like the JX8P here. It has additional tracks, and the reason for that is that some of the synths I'm able to control with an editor. I'm using the IPG800 for my Roland JX8P and the Alpha Junos. It works really nice with those because they respond to sysex, and this is basically a programmer that I can use with those synths. So let's take that with the JX8P. I can basically program my sounds directly from here. So this is really fast way of working, but the best thing is that it works both ways. I can select on the synth the sound I want, and then I directly will see on the tablet the program parameters for that particular sound. So that's really convenient because then I just can continue from that sound and program it as I wish. And then that way I also can overcome the limitation of these old synths with only having like, this one I think has 32 memory locations. So what I can do is that I just adjust the sound as I want to have it, and then I basically take a dump, not a screen dump, but I can take a patch dump and just record it into Cubase. And there I have the sysx data for that particular sound. So that's really convenient. Then I can just send it back to the synth just before the song starts. And yeah, so essentially I have like unlimited patch storage locations for the Alpha Junos and for the JX8P. So that's really convenient. I really love this system. So this was an introduction to my studio and to my workflow and how everything is connected. In the following videos we are going to go more in depth into the mixing and arranging of certain songs. So until that, I hope you enjoyed the video and see you soon.